So till now, we have resolved that every individual will have some amount of agency, capacity to work, original thinking, creativity, and when such individual receives any kind of a instruction, there is a agency problem in the sense that instruction may be accepted in the right view and in the right opinion, or the agency may reject that particular instruction. So now we have also seen that the principal becomes vulnerable against the agent because he is not aware of the various qualities, capacity, or personality traits of the particular agent. In this case, we observe that the problem of information asymmetry creates many kinds of problems, and that is why the core question is whether we should continue on the basis of chance or we should be very decisive in making the contract a successful proposition. So here comes the answer. Whenever you are faced with problems of agency, it is better to work smart and develop a smart contract, a contract which is able to answer to the various questions and queries of the agent, and it is able to strategically attack on the agency problem. So the very fact that everybody has an agency makes us think more, and we have to be more strategic in our approach in resolving the problem. So we have seen that monitoring does not work. We have also resolved that being hopeful that agent will fulfill the task is also not a good answer. Therefore, we go to the original solution, that is how we can create a smart contract which is able to answer many of the questions which were unanswered when principal meets the agent. The solution to the problem is to design a contract that the right agent with the right incentive is able to help in getting through the work done. So what should a contract look like? That is the question. So we are essentially going to a territory where we are suggesting that there can be a model. So in every model there are few assumptions. So we have 2-3 assumptions which are important for us. Assumption number 1. So let's assume that the agent can have 2 levels of performance, high level or low level. So if the agent engages in a high level of effort, the probability of selling the house is 90%. If the agency is not working well, then there is a probability of not selling the house. So in that case, we are talking about non-compliance, and therefore we have to be little reasonable. So how will we react when there is compliance, and how will we react when there is non-compliance? So here comes assumption number 1, that in case of a high effort, agent might sell the house for, let us say, 1 lakh rupees because of low demand. So therefore, if the agent wins, there is an element of luck. If the agent loses, again there is an element of luck. So we say that the error rate of the agent should be not more than 10%. So we believe that 10% is happening by chance, or 10% the agent is not able to sell because of the circumstances. So we have to give the benefit of doubt to the worth of the agent, because after all the agent has been selected by us only. So the first assumption says that the principal model accepts an error rate of 10%. The second assumption comes from the general observation of people. So generally you see people are risk averse. So given a chance, we would like to have 100% payment rather than a chance of 50-50, because we don't want to take a risk. So if you look at the characteristics of an agent, he is risk averse. That is the second assumption. Finally, we also say that definitely the house has to be sold in a particular period of time. So here we take the assumption of 30 days. Within 30 days, if the task is done, it is a good proposition. If it is taking more than that, essentially we say that the contract has failed to answer the question. And then finally we look at the rationality assumption. So the principal and agent, both of them are rational beings. That means they would like to maximize the benefits. They would like to think scientifically, act logically, and they will always behave for certain benefits. So before we go into the construction of a contract, let us imagine what kind of people are there in the world, because after all, when you search for the agent, there can be 2-3 types of agent. So the first type is a non-performer. So you have to be ready with a contract for a person who is not wanting to work. Complete non-performer. So how are you going to motivate that non-performer, or are you going to have very high odds for this kind of an agent? So we will see what kind of contract options are available. Secondly, we can also think of a lazy person, a person who is capable of working but unable to deliver because of personal characteristics. So it may be related to time, it may be related to nature of work. Sometimes when you look at an agent, he has very strict preferences. So I will work in the morning only, I will work in the evening only, I will not travel. There can be several kinds of dispositions of an agent which is not allowing the contract to go through. Similarly, we can have agents who are very true to their character and personality. So what if you encounter an agent who is very sincere, hardworking? We cannot offer the same contract that we offer to a lazy person, right? So therefore we have to be smart enough to have contracts which are horses for courses. So we have to think ahead of the agent. So that is the whole proposition. Now further, we also look at certain situations where special agents are found, extraordinary talent is there. So whether we are going to follow all the rules of contract, are we going to have consideration as decided previously? So we have to be very careful while we strategize formation of a contract. So in this entire designing part of the contract, we have to be very much aware of the characteristics and nature of the agent, and then according to the nature of agent, when we give a contract, generally the chances of failure is less. So friends, now we are now ready to look at the different types of contract. So suppose we look at an agent. Let us say you want to pay the agent least amount of money that you can pay and get away with, namely any amount, 5,000 rupees for example. So how are you going to engage that agent to high effort, right? So we have a concept called an optimal contract. See, because we have assumed that the agent is going to be risk averse, so we have to think of a contract which is thinking of an agent who is going to strategize on maximum efforts, right? So the odds will be like, I'll pay you 3,000 rupees if you are successful, or it's going to be 0 or nil, because we have to also send a message that if you don't perform, then the rewards are not going to be waiting for you. So we can think of a optimal contract. So while you can't be sure that your house will be sold in the right price, remember that luck cannot be eliminated entirely. So as we already discussed that the error rate is going to be 10%. So accordingly, we are going to set a contract which says that if you are successful, full amount; if you are not successful, 0. Of course, if your agent is going to be sincere, he is not going to look at 0 as an option, because he knows that with sincerity and hard work he is going to achieve the goal. So here is the first type of the contract, which is optimal contract. This optimal contract can only be taken as a baseline. Remember, we start at a particular baseline. So we say that if you are successful, 5,000 rupees; if you are not successful, 0. That is the baseline that we have selected. It won't work in the real world, where you can't directly observe the effort of the agent. Now you won't be able to say to the agent that I'll pay you only if you engage in high effort, because that is not how all the agents are arranging themselves. So they will have difficult questions for you. What about my allowance? What about my time? What about the effort and sincerity? Because I am putting efforts, but things are not moving. So how would you know whether I engage in high effort? That would be the basic question by the agent. So sometimes you have to go for the flat rate contract. One possibility is to pay the agent a flat rate, right? So here comes the second type of the contract, which is the flat rate contract. For example, you might promise to pay the agent a rate of, let us say, 100 rupees per hour, right? Whether the work is done or not, but 100 rupee every time you are going to report to work, 100 rupee will be paid. An alternative is to pay the agent full amount of 5,000 when the house is sold. So till the time the house is not getting sold, we have to keep the agent interested. So that is why flat rate contract is another kind of a contract which is for people who are very calculative. So what happens to every minute, what happens to every effort that I put? If you find that kind of a difficult agent, this is the answer. You can have flat rate, and you can also reward for winning over the performance, right? So when we look at the amount versus the effort, there is always a difficulty in explaining how did you decide. Of course, we are going to look at the market rate. We are not going to be below the market rate. Maybe this is also one of the very important assumptions. So after flat rate, we have another consideration. Can we have high power incentive contract? As we talked about a lazy person, people who are looking at a particular type of incentive, everybody has a horizon कि इतना तो मुझे मिलना चाहिए. Another possibility is to say that the agent will be paid an amount that increases with sale price. So if the sale price is 50 lakhs, a particular amount will be given to you. Suppose you are successful in selling the house at 55 lakhs. I have to give you incentive because you are performing exceedingly well. So in this example, the house is sold at a baseline. If it is sold at a baseline, then the effort is only equivalent to what was promised. But if it is exceeding the effort, then we have to incentivize the agent properly. So this contract would give an agent incentive to engage in high effort. Clear? So sometimes you are not able to give instruction for all actions. So what if I get a very proactive, very smart agent who is able to think himself, who has lot of experience? So in such a case, we cannot give a flat rate contract. We have to give high powered incentive based contract. Okay. So further we can look at a mixed contract. So which is a proposition which has a baseline, which has incentive, which is also talking about allowances. So when you have a mixed approach, you are able to serve to all the questions of the agent, because again the construct, the design of the contract will be answering the particular questions which are raised by a particular agent. Then we talked about a very extraordinary agent. Oftentimes we come to terms with agents who are able to overperform. So such overperformance has to be seen very carefully. We cannot hand over the basic type of contracts to such agents. In that case we have to ensure that certain types of rewards are allocated. We have to break certain basic rules of contract. So it may be related to consideration, it may be related to compensation, special compensation, or in certain ways we give special valuation to the agent so that he is really motivated to perform. So all the types of contract that we discussed about, basically it is an attack on the agency and the basic questions raised by different types of agents. So if we are able to answer to the various questions of the agent properly, then we can hold the agent and his interest according to the terms and conditions which are written in a contract. So one of the key learning points of this entire discussion is contract cannot be anything which is uniformly done. It is not a homogeneous proposition. It is differentiated. It answers to the questions of the agent, and it has to look at the personality traits of the agent in order to be successful. So in the next edition we look at the law and crime. So with this we come to the end of the discussion on economic theory of contract law. So basically we learned that contract design is the heart of the matter. Rather than the complications of agent, we have to give more importance to the construction of the contract. Thank you very much, guys.